Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on what is one of the most beautiful days I've seen this year, I think. So very much appreciated that you've come to join us at this event. So good afternoon and welcome to all. Women in International Security Netherlands is delighted to be hosting this event in cooperation with Women in the Women in International Law Network. My name is Dr. Vanessa Newby. I'm president of the WISE Netherlands chapter based here at The Hague, embedded in Leiden University. Women in International Security is a global organization dedicated to advancing the leadership and professional development of women in the field of international security. WISE Netherlands, WISE NL, is an affiliate of WISE Global, which has around 30 chapters worldwide. Our members include professionals, civil servants, academics, NGO staff, embassy staff, politicians, students, and members of the general public. We support research and policy engagement initiatives on critical international security issues, particularly on the nexus between gender and security. Our main area of focus is the Women, Peace and Security agenda, with a minor focus on justice institutions, given we're based here in The Hague. The reason we were keen to support this event is because we believe that without justice and the rule of law, there can be no security. In particular for groups that have traditionally been excluded from decision-making processes at local, national and international levels. As a new initiative, I'm very excited to hear about the experiences of the gender focal points in the international court system. Finally, I want to remind you that WISE Netherlands will soon be accepting subscribers as a newly formed stichting or foundation. Please do consider joining WISE Netherlands. This will enable you to stay informed about our upcoming events and enjoy access to all the benefits of WISE Global membership in the same package. Please visit our website for more details. I'll now hand over to my colleague from the Women in International Law Network, Katarina Koffler. Thank you, Katarina.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, and good afternoon to all of you. And thank you for being here in front of your screens and not at the beach yet. My name is Katarina Koffler. I'm the legal advisor at the Austrian Embassy in The Hague, and I am a board member of the Women International Law Network. And it is my pleasure to welcome you all today on behalf of the WIL Network. The WIL Network is an informal network for mid-level to senior female officials, experts, advisors, and academics working in international law in the Netherlands. It was established in 2017 with the aim to advance gender equality by creating a supportive environment for women to foster professional and personal connections, enhancing awareness for gender topics, for women's achievements and talents, and to enable women to share information, experience, and ideas to bring about positive social change. Today's event is also a bit of a comeback for us because, like many of you, we were hit by the COVID-19 crisis, and this is our first event for more than a year, and it is our first online event ever. Before this involuntary break, we had started with a series of events on issues around #MeToo and how to address gender issues at workplace and workplace harassment. And we organized different roundtables with gender focal points of various institutions in The Hague. So today's discussion on the gender agenda in international justice is a continuation on of the important discussions we started before the pandemic. And quite a lot has happened in the meantime. On 8 March this year, International Women's Day, the International Criminal Court appointed its first focal point for gender equality. Now, all international criminal tribunals in The Hague have a gender focal point for the very first time. Other organizations like the Special Tribunal of Lebanon established the position of a gender focal point already quite a while ago, and new organizations such as the ECOSOC Specialist Chambers and Specialist Prosecutor's Office early on in their establishment already. Gender focal points act as chief advocates of gender matters. They support leadership in developing and implementing gender mainstreaming strategies, and they raise awareness for gender issues among staff. And to quote the title of one of the recent ICC press releases on the topic, gender equality is not only right and necessary, but a driver of performance and success for the organization. Today, we want to hear more about the experiences of gender focal points and challenges they face in their day-to-day work. The WIL Network is committed to supporting the important work of gender focal points and their activities, and we hope to also contribute a little bit to creating a network of the focal points in The Hague. All that's left for me is to thank our speakers, WISE Netherlands for organizing this roundtable together with us, and Leiden University for e-hosting us, and of course, to introduce you to our wonderful moderator for today, Ms. Maria Manolescu, a member of the WISE Netherlands board. Maria is currently serving as a legal officer at the Kosovo Specialist Chambers and has practical as well as academic experience in governance of international courts and tribunals. She's a PhD researcher in financial governance of international courts and tribunals at Leiden University. She has previously worked with 2 defense teams at the International Criminal Court and assisted the independent experts group, which conducted a review of the ICC last year. With that, I thank you all for being here and hand the floor over to you, Maria. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Katarina, and welcome everyone. We're delighted to have not only impressive speakers, but also an impressive audience with a great mix of representatives of international organizations, representatives of international courts as well as diplomats, academics, and students. Also happy to note it's a quite gender balanced audience that we have. Very briefly about the format of the event before we get straight to it. Each speaker is going to have about 5 minutes for brief opening remarks, after which we move on straight to your questions. You can submit your question at any point in the lower part of the Zoom window. If you click the Q&A button, please write it in. We will do our best to cover all your questions during the Q&A section. We will aim to end the event at 6, so a bit before that, we're going to give the floor again to the speakers for concluding remarks. A final note that, as you might be seeing on the screen, we're recording the event and the digital recording will be made available after the event. Now, to get on with the discussions, I'd like to now introduce our first speaker, Ms. Daniela Rudi, who currently serves as a legal officer in the Office of the President of the Kosovo Specialist Chambers and is the gender focal point of the KSC and the Specialist Prosecutor's Office. Previously, Daniela was with the President's offices of the International Residual Mechanism for Criminal Tribunals and the ICTY, and she has further assisted judges with appeals cases in the ICTY and ICTR, as well as with an ICTR trial proceeding. Daniela also participated in the representation of victims before the extraordinary chambers in the courts of Cambodia, and later assisted the co-prosecutors at that court on appeal. Daniela, over to you.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. I would like to start by thanking Women in International Security, the Netherlands, for organizing today's event in collaboration with the Women in International Law Network. These events bring together the practitioners and the friends and followers of our field, international criminal justice, and allow us to take stock of where we are, how far we've come, and help us see where we still need to go. I look forward to today's dialogue moderated by Maria, and it's a true pleasure to be on this panel along with Antonia from the International Criminal Court and Natalie from the Special Tribunal for Lebanon. As just introduced, I'm Daniela Rudi. I'm a legal advisor to the President of the Kosovo Specialist Chambers, Judge Ekaterina Trandafilova. And in addition to this role, I've served since last year as the gender focal point for both the court and the Specialist Prosecutor's Office. For those of you who may not be familiar with the Kosovo Specialist Chambers, the court was established following the Kosovo Assembly's ratification of an exchange of letters with the European Union and the Kosovo Assembly's adoption of an amendment to its constitution in 2015. The court's jurisdiction includes crimes against humanity, war crimes, and other crimes under Kosovo law, which were commenced or committed in Kosovo between 1998 and the end of 2000. Currently, the court has 4 cases involving 8 accused, and one of these cases is about to start trial. This institution is, of course, the newest International Criminal Tribunal. From the outset, 2 of the 3 principals have been women, which shows the tremendous progress that the international community has made in terms of women in leadership positions at the International Criminal Tribunals. The Kosovo Specialist Chambers and the Specialist Prosecutor's Office, from their inception, have been actively engaged in fostering an inclusive work environment where gender mainstreaming is part of their institutional fabric. Leadership in this area has come from the top as each of the three principals, the president, the registrar, and the prosecutor, consider this a priority and actively support initiatives and events to bring these issues into focus and put the core principles of gender mainstreaming into practice. As a gender focal point, I'm part of that larger commitment and assist the principals where needed in their efforts to ensure diversity and equality in the workplace. In this capacity, I have, together with our Human Resources Department, helped organize trainings, including one for senior managers on gender mainstreaming. And together we're working on incorporating gender mainstreaming in our induction material for new staff members, and have focused on specific sections within the court and the specialist prosecutor's office in terms of achieving more gender parity within those units with some real visible success. And I can touch upon some of these examples more concretely during our discussions. In addition, our court held a virtual celebration of International Women's Day in March of this year. This event in particular provided a platform for telling individual stories, highlighting some of the court's successes in achieving gender parity in fields traditionally dominated by men, including in our security unit, which has shown some very strong gains in this respect. But before concluding and moving into the discussion phase and hearing from the other panelists, I would like to highlight an important aspect of gender parity that's beyond the mandate of gender focal points in our individual courts, but that does in its own way have an impact on the manner in which justice is dispensed and by whom, and that is gender parity among the judiciary. If my calculations are correct, there are currently around 99 judges serving on international criminal tribunals. Of these, only 28 are women, which is roughly 28%. Gender parity among the judges of the Kosovo Specialist Chambers tracks the international average. The court has 23 judges, and of these 23, 6 are women, which is around 26%. Gender parity among the judges is beyond the institution's specific control. Indeed, there's a separate and independent selection process for judges at my court. Nonetheless, despite the low percentage of judges who are women, in our court, the president, the presiding judges of the Supreme Court chamber, the current appeals court panel, and the currently assigned trial panel are all women. About 2/3 of the legal support staff for the judges are women as well. Here, I would like to think, is where an institution's culture of inclusion can make an important difference in making strides to bridge the gender parity gap and to ensure diversity, even where there are certain factors beyond its control. Dialogues like the one we're having today go a long way toward generating new ideas and confirming best practices to ensure that we all have strong institutional cultures that value gender equality and mainstreaming. I look forward to hearing from the other panelists and to participating in this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daniela, for sharing those highlights of the case here and also in the context of some statistics of international judiciary in general. We'll now move on to our second speaker, Nathalie Zarour, who is currently the chef de cabinet and senior advisor to the registrar, as well as the gender focal point of the Special Tribunal for Lebanon. Previously, she was project manager at the Disaster Risk Management Unit at the Presidency of Council of Ministers for almost a decade. Between 2002 and 2009, she served as senior legal advisor in the Lebanese Prime Minister's office. Nathalie, you have the floor. I think you still have to unmute. Thank you.
Fine. Okay. So I would like to join Daniela in thanking the organizers for this interesting webinar. If I want to introduce myself and the tribunal, the Special Tribunal for Lebanon was created in 2009 after the assassination of the previous Lebanese Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri and 22 persons. And the tribunal started in The Hague in 2009. And as you said, before coming here, I was working at the Prime Minister office, and I worked with Prime Minister Hariri. And maybe I'm the oldest among you because I started my women activities in 1993. I was an intern lawyer, and we were preparing for the Lebanese paper on Beijing conference. And I was very active in implementing the CEDAW in Lebanon. So I have been very familiar in the challenges that can face women in the legal environment, in the private and the public sector. And even when I was appointed Chef de Cabinet at the STL, I was also advising and following up on behalf of the registrar for all the issues of the gender focal point, because we appointed the first gender focal point in 2018, and it was Laurence, and a lot has been done, and she can take the credit for what she has done at the STL. And at the STL, you know, respecting our staff regulations, there are various mechanisms already in place to the handling of potential staff grievance, such as the internal disciplinary process established pursuant to Article 10 of the staff regulations and rules, and relevant administrative instructions, and or to seek counseling, such as the position of the staff welfare officer. The establishment of a gender focal point within the tribunal ensures that there is an additional individual who can provide guidance and support to both staff and supervisors on gender-related issues. The main role of the gender focal point at the Special Tribunal for Lebanon is to counsel, advise, and assist the staff members, the judges, the registrar, the individuals, the contractors, the fellows and interns on gender issues, such as generic advice and direction, to assist an individual in addressing personal issues by ensuring they are directed to the appropriate professional resource mechanism, both within the STL and externally. Methods and appropriate channels to resolve and or report situations involving harassment, including sexual harassment, discrimination, or abuse, in line with the relevant rules. Issues affecting career development, for example, career planning, work-life balance, conditions of service. The gender focal point brings the concerns expressed by individuals as necessary to the chief of section, the chief of HR, and head of the organs. Provide advice within the STL sections and organs on gender sensitivity, work-life balance, and career path strategies, and encourage greater participation of women in training programs. And also shares gender's resource information and arrange for briefings for staff and non-staff and on an ad hoc basis. The gender focal point may also be called upon by the STL managers, supervisors, head of organs, head of divisions, office, sections, in fulfilling their responsibilities for the achievements of a harmonious work environment free from discrimination, harassment, and abuse of authority at all levels. By promoting greater awareness of gender issues and gender-sensitive work environment, providing advocacy and counsel to staff members in the STL, promoting gender parity throughout the organization, assisting to resolve any gender-related problems. So this is it, and I'm open to your questions.
Thank you very much, Natalie, for that insight. And it's great to see we have not only gender focal points appointed at different times in the development of the institution, but also individuals who worked on since '93 on gender mainstreaming. Now, I'd like to introduce our third speaker, Antonia Pereira de Sousa, who was appointed as the first focal point for gender equality at the International Criminal Court on 8th of March of this year. Before that, she was External Relations and Cooperation Officer in the Registry since 2016, and an Associate Cooperation Advisor in the Office of the Prosecutor from 2008 to 2016. Antonia is also a founding member of the LGBTQI+ informal network, ICCQ, within the ICC, and served as a member of the board of directors of the Women in International Law Network in the Netherlands. Antonia, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Maria. Many thanks to Women in International Security, the Netherlands, and Women in International Law for this great event and this opportunity to come together with my co-gender focal points colleagues across The Hague. It's really a pleasure to have the opportunity to resume the events of Women in International Law and to resume the opportunities to engage with the women that are working in whether international law and international security in the Netherlands, have a chance to discuss the contributions that we all are bringing to women empowerment in these key topics. It's really crucial. So as Katarina already mentioned, the ICC is sort of like the last comer to this party. The International Criminal Court was created, as you know, by a treaty, the Rome Statute in 1998, and which entered into force in 2002, and we started effectively operations in 2004. And as you mentioned, Maria, we established the mandate of gender equality focal point in March this year for International Women's Day. It was in the coming for some years. There were enhanced efforts from the side of the organization and enhanced commitment from the side of the principals of the court, from the side of the president, the prosecutor, and the registrar in the recent years, especially since the last staff engagement survey that we had in 2018, and which really highlighted the need to make gender equality, to make workplace culture a priority for the organization and for the leaders of the organization. So this was reflected in the strategic plans that were issued by the court and by the different organs of the court for 2019 to 2021, where gender equality was very clearly highlighted as a priority, and it was also reflected as priorities for the organization in terms of our court-wide staff well-being and engagement priorities, as well as our human resources management strategic priorities as well. So you saw it becoming something that we were addressing in a more strategic and holistic way, if you wish, since 2018. And we've had some interesting projects and initiatives that have been put in place since then. Of course, this move was also encouraged by the report and the recommendations that were done by the independent experts that did a review of the court and the Rome Statute system in 2019 and issued their report consequently, in which they highlighted that the work culture of the court and the issue of gender equality needed to be further addressed, and again recommended the creation of a mandate of gender focal point. So this all led really since 2019, reinforced in 2020, to the establishment of my function. As my colleagues, I am a gender focal point, but the advantage of being a latecomer is that you benefit from the advantage of what was done before you. And hindsight, well, it's definitely not 2020, as we have learned last year, but hindsight does help. And so the good development with my mandate is that I am in full-time on my mandate. So I'm not continuing my activities as external relations and cooperation officer. I am really full-time on the mandate of gender equality focal point, which I think also demonstrates the commitment of the organization to the issue, and a good development, hopefully, that will be also taken into consideration by other organizations. I have 5 key areas that are part of my mandate, which I think also sort of like piggyback on the experience of the STL and the Kosovo Specialized Chambers, and more generally the UN system. The first one is about, of course, advocating on issues related to gender equality, women and gender in general, providing individual counsel to staff on matters related to gender equality. I also have, as part of my mandate, to monitor the court's progress in this area. The 4th area is also to raise awareness on gender equality through trainings, through workshops, through events, a little bit like what Daniela was mentioning in terms of what she had accomplished at the Kosovo Specialized Chambers in terms of training for managers and in onboarding for new staff. And the last element is, of course, and again, something that my 2 co-panelists already mentioned, trying to deal with gender parity, which is an issue at the court as well. We are lucky in the sense that since the elections in December 2020, our judges panel is completely balanced. We have 9 women judges and 9 men judges, which is, I think, quite good. It's a good development. But women are still heavily underrepresented in senior positions at the ICC, as across a lot of our organizations. We have really a glass ceiling at the P3 level that hits hard. And so that's also part of the priorities that we want to address from the side of the organization. I just wanted to mention that, as part of this mandate and as we look into the mandate of Gender Focal Point, my key priority right now is really to institutionalize and mainstream the mandate and this, approach regarding gender equality, and also to make sure that it is understood as part of a wider reframing of everything that has to do with workplace culture. Gender equality cannot exist without a cultural rethinking, without a structural rethinking. It is not enough to have enough women represented at senior levels if you don't change the culture and the structure within which work is taking place. So I think that's a key point as well that I think also we all share in this panel. And just to share a last point, as I mentioned, there were some initiatives already on the way before I started, and I've certainly hit the ground running since March, catching up to some of them. A lot of efforts from the side of our HR colleagues when it comes to recruitment to deal with the gender parity aspect, but also when it comes to training, having gender mainstreaming in terms of training, working on anti-harassment trainings, also working on reviewing and strengthening our policies and administrative instructions when it comes to harassment, when it comes to bullying, when it comes to disciplinary proceedings. Looking also, as was mentioned also already, to everything that has to do with work-life balance, especially as we learn from what it was to work under COVID. We, I think, have all learned that we can work productively remotely, and that we need to be able to implement more flexible working arrangements for our staff, that can actually contribute to performance and to productivity. I think that was reflected to a certain extent with the high-level statement that the officials of the court adopted on 30 April 2021. That was the first time that we had a high-level statement adopted specifically on gender equality by the principles of an international criminal tribunal. So I think it was a good development. I think it also highlighted key areas that we have been mentioning about, workplace culture, about gender parity, about acceptable behaviors, and about culture, really the culture that needs to be more diverse, more inclusive, and safer for staff. And last point, I certainly don't want to reinvent the wheel. Again, my colleagues in the panel have been here before me working on this, and many others that are part of this conversation, as well as I see some former and current gender focal points in other roles. We need to reinforce and strengthen each other's mandate. That's really why also from my get-go, one of my first actions was to contact Daniela, to contact Natalie, to contact the other gender focal points in The Hague, to see how we could reinforce each other through networking, through sharing our experiences, to sharing our resources. Our experience is not unique. What makes it even less unique is that we try to reinforce gender equality and support across these institutions together. So thank you very much, because I think this event really contributes to that networking and to that coordination that needs to take place and that reinforcement. So very happy to continue these discussions right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Antonia. And we're very happy we can offer this platform both for networking, but also to offer everyone else a better understanding of the very important work you are doing. From now, I'd like to specifically address our audience to encourage you to send in questions. You can do so through the Q&A function of Zoom. But I'd like to start off with a simple practical question so that we're all on the same page. Antonia, you mentioned that you're doing this job, this role full time. I'm wondering if perhaps Daniela or Natalie, you can tell us how does that work for you? It's in parallel. And for any of the three speakers, how does it look in practice? What is the usual, who are your interlocutors? And beyond the general tasks, what does it look in practice? Daniela, do you want to start perhaps? And then
Sure, happy to. Yes, unlike Antonia, indeed, I do this in parallel to the job for which I was hired, which was legal officer to the president of the Kosovo Specialist Chambers. So it's in addition to, it's on top of, which does indeed come with its own sort of challenges in the sense of managing kind of time for both things. But I think so far, and I really have to say that all three principals have been incredibly supportive, and because it is such a priority for them, they, yes, obviously I have to get my tasks and everything done in terms of my actual job, but they are also very supportive in the time that I need and resources that I need to be able to perform functions as gender focal point. And practically, I guess also what I've done in this respect, and it kind of goes back to what Antonia was saying, is obviously, you don't operate alone, you don't operate in a vacuum. And I think for me, what's been really helpful is kind of reaching out to people within the institution also who have a tremendous amount of experience also dealing with this and have an interest in as helping and assisting, and including, our deputy within HR, as well as, senior operational managers and people in SBO who have been incredibly generous with their time and really thinking along and helping and providing with ideas. And from there, kind of the ball starts running and you get momentum and you can get things going. And so it's actually come quite organically. And really, I'm quite grateful to all those who kind of stepped up and helped me in these efforts and provide ideas. And so concretely, what that means is, we've had certain matters that have been identified as, we could use strengthening here, or maybe we should look at our policies when it comes to, like I mentioned in my opening remarks, when it comes to induction for new staff. How do we look at gender balance when it comes to our recruitment panels, things like that, and talking concretely with those. And then it's actually gone, very easily up to either speaking with the registrar or the specialist prosecutor or the president, who've all been incredibly helpful and supportive. And so a lot of it goes quite organically, I have to say, and it's been very, very helpful. I hope that answers.
Okay, me too. I do it in parallel with my job, and we have to say that all the four principals, we have four principals, 2 women, 2 men at the tribunal, and all of them are very supportive to the role of the gender focal point. And the 4 principals are champions of in the network of gender champions. They were all supportive, and especially HR, staff union, they were also supportive. And even when the gender focal point started in 2018, there were working groups, and there were more than 15 volunteering from the staff to help the gender focal point in the activities, in the surveys. And so we do it with our job, we do as much as we can.
Thank you very much, Daniela and Natalie. We have a question now for Antonia with 2 small parts. The first one is, in what way does the role of focal point, gender focal point at the ICC relate to the work of the gender advisor to the prosecutor? And secondly, if you have already identified any particular challenges specific to the ICC, and this question is from Paulina Tutik from the Polish Embassy.
Many thanks, Marianne. Many thanks, Paulina. A pleasure to hear from you through this medium. On the gender advisor, the current gender advisor of the prosecutor is Dr. Patricia Sellers. I've had the chance to talk to her a few times. My understanding is that the mandate of the gender advisor to the prosecutor is really, well, first of all, it's an advisor to the prosecutor, so not to the 3 principals, but to the prosecutor specifically. And the mandate of the gender advisor is really to advise the office of the prosecutor in the conduct of its mandate to investigate and prosecute the crimes that are defined in the Rome Statute, and to ensure that the gender perspective, and specifically the sexual and gender crimes policy, that the OTP issued in 2014 is being implemented accordingly. So if you wish, it is a mandate that is more linked to the operations of the Office of the Prosecutor, and not so much, or maybe in a marginal way, to matters related to staff and staff well-being and workplace culture. That being said, I think that to me raises something that is crucial, and that my other two co-panelists have already mentioned, is that we need to work with all of our colleagues within the organization to ensure that our mandate is implemented. And it may not be your obvious partner that will have all of the answers to your questions. All these matters are scattered across human resources, legal offices, staff union, your health unit, so many partners that have not only experience, but that are putting together specific initiatives, and that we really need to have a proper understanding of them and make sure that we're not, repeating or duplicating efforts, and that we're properly coordinating them. One of the things that I was so impressed when I started, and I've been working at the ICC for 14 years, so I was still impressed by something, which is great about the court, is that there were so many staff-led initiatives regarding to gender at the ICC. And I think that demonstrates also the importance that colleagues vest on the issue, and also the fact that we are moving into frameworks of organizational culture that are really becoming bottom up, in the sense that there are staff that are really driving the ways that we need to rethink our organization, our structures, and our culture through actions that they're doing outside of their mandate, outside of their job, through gender field clubs, or through organizing panels, or through doing research on proper trainings, trying to deal with issues at their section or at the division level. So there's a lot of impetus, a lot of movement on the issue, which also allows me to rely on so many partners, formal and informal, in-house, which is really what we need, because the mandate is so big. There's so many areas where we need to be looking at, that the more partnerships we can build inside and outside the organizations, the better we are. When it comes to specific challenges to the ICC, I think we tend to think that when we're at the ICC that we're sort of like unique. I don't think we're very unique in that sense. I mean, I think we are an international organization, and I think we are a legal organization. So in that sense, we bring together specific work environments. And of course, we're, by being an international organization, we're an organization where a lot of cultures and a lot of experiences come together, and where we try to identify what brings us together, what are our commonalities, what are our drivers, what are our values, and that is, that can be a challenge, but I see it only as a richness. The point being, and I'm sorry because I see my cat having fun in the background. I hope that is not disturbing too many people. I think the importance is really for us to see through that richness, through that diversity, that we're also reflecting inclusivity. And I think there was another question that was in the chat about intersectionality, and that is a key element also for us. We've been discussing this with other gender focal points. There's one common mistake that colleagues maybe often do, which is to think that a gender focal point is only going to work for women, right? And also when we talk about gender balance, we also want to make sure that we're talking also about geographical representation in the context of gender balance, right? We don't necessarily want to have gender balance only reflecting a certain geographic group or a certain continent or a certain experience, like a certain kind of legal culture. We need to embrace the richness and the diversity that comes from an international organization, especially for the ICC that wants to be universal. It needs to be reflective of that diversity, and it needs to make sure that it has that it creates a safe ground, a safe environment for that diversity to be embraced and to be a richness and not to be a blockage. So I think that'll be my answer to you.
Thank you very much, Antonia. Indeed, we had a question about how the work of Gender Focal Point touches upon topics of intersectionality. Daniela, do you have anything to add perhaps on this from your experience?
That is interesting. I think it's very akin to what Antonia was saying before as well. It's really bearing in mind, and that's also part of sort of raising the awareness and kind of making sure that throughout the institution there is, just broadly speaking, an equal, inclusive, and very diverse culture, right, and an inclusivity. And I think making sure that it is, and I think that's also partially what we're trying to do, and what I've been trying to do within is raising an awareness about the fact that, yes, this is about gender parity, but this is much broader than that. It's not simply only women, as Antonia just pointed out. It goes beyond that. It's inclusivity when it comes to our different backgrounds, our different cultures. It comes to, and also, I mean, take the example of chambers where I work. 2/3 are women, which is fantastic. And it shows sort of, if you look, as I touched upon earlier, and you look at sort of the balance when it comes to women judges, it's really great to see that. And I hope it really is an indicator for the future when it comes to these women rising up through the ranks. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't forget and pay attention that, you know, inclusivity and equality is important, and having a balanced chambers is equally important in that respect. And so, so yes, in that respect, we're looking at that from the same in the same way.
Thank you, Daniela. We have another question. I'll address this to Natalie. How far do you think one can legislate for gender equality versus grassroots community momentum? How can that be harnessed to increase awareness?
It depends on the society, it depends on the organization, it depends if you are talking about laws, right? Legislations. I can give you the example, for example, of the CEDAW. When we implemented the CEDAW in Lebanon. Lebanon approved on the CEDAW with two reserves. It was the law of the nationality, because the Lebanese woman, she's not allowed to give her nationality to her kids because of many political problems in the area. And another problem is the personal status. So people, when they get married under the rule of their religion, not under a civil law. We don't have a civil law. But either with that, we had a lot of discrimination on women in many laws. So the Lebanese woman was not allowed to go and open a bank account to her kids. They were not equal in the social security. They were not, the woman, she was not allowed to travel without the authorization of her father. She was not allowed to be to have a business without the authorization of her husband. So we had to change all these laws, and now we are still struggling with the two reserves that Lebanon has made on the CEDAW. So that's why it's like my colleagues are saying, like Antonia and Daniela, it's in the mentality. You have to change the mentality, and then everything is possible. But you have to educate, because we had a big challenge in Lebanon. I remember in the 80s, how do we present in the school books the woman? My mom is cooking, my dad is reading the newspapers. So you have to change it in the mentality of the kids.
If I may follow up with a question, thank you for the insight on this. If we were to transpose this question to the institutional setting of the tribunal or a court, what do you think about, to what extent can one regulate or work towards advancing gender equality, gender mainstreaming through internal rules and regulations versus harnessing grassroots momentum, so initiative of individuals in the tribunal?
It's not grassroots as much. For example, in the STL, we tried as much as we can to have a gender equality. We have 48% of women as a whole. But if you go, for example, to the language sections, it's 80% women. If you go to the security section, it's much more, it's 70% men. Because also women, they choose their career, and until now there are careers for women, careers in the mentality of people.
Indeed. If I may, Daniela, I think you mentioned that the KSC had some progress with gender parity, specifically in this division security and also in the SPO. Perhaps you can tell us a bit of how that came about.
Yeah, of course. No, and I think going back to the earlier, it's sort of wrapped up or it's sort of the same. I think there are ways, obviously, within to promote sort of gender inclusivity and equality, and part of that comes from sort of grassroots momentum. Part of that comes from having certain rules and regulations in place, and I'm not sure I would call them rules and regulations per se, but perhaps more policies and things like that. And one of the examples may be staff, induction training materials to make sure that new staff that come in are educated and are aware of existing rules and regulations, but also of the institutional sort of culture, if you will, and kind of embrace that and immediately run with that. And that's something that we're trying to work on. And yes, as I touched on before, I mean, we really have had some notable successes in this respect when it comes to gender parity in certain institutions. We've really tried to kind of target and identify certain specific sections, including security within the KSC, and really tried to find ways, in different ways, to kind of attract a qualified applicant pool, men and women. And over the years, it's really shown and made a huge difference. And we're steadily increasing when it comes to female security at the KSC, which is one of the great things. At the SPO as well, where we've now, having spoken and reached out, and we had a lot of discussions because there were 2 units that were identified where we did, really needed, where they needed more female and qualified female applicants as well. And following recent sort of job applications that were sent out, part of what we did is looking at, what do these job applications say? Is there ways in which we can kind of tweak the language that would make it more accessible or that would change? One of the other big successes that we're quite proud of is now having sort of language in our job descriptions at the moment that says that you have to demonstrate that you have gender awareness and sensitivity, and that you have the ability to promote, an inclusive work environment, and integrate a gender perspective in your tasks and responsibilities. And so that means that basically, again, from very inception, when staff come in, they have to show that they can actually contribute to this. This is part of our working culture. We can actually, hold you accountable against this and test you on this knowledge. And, as far as the SPO goes at this point, at least within these sections, particularly IT, but also the witness and operational security section, we've seen a huge and, very significant increase in very qualified female applicants, which has been great. And a lot of that has to do with sort of targeted outreach by, from top down, in terms of professionals who've reached out to their own networks, who've reached out to other courts, who've reached out to the EU, have spent a tremendous time really investing in trying to increase gender parity and it looks like it's bearing fruit, which is great. I mean, but I think a lot of it comes from both from management and kind of leading by example, as well as from the bottom up, and knowing that when you come in, what type of an environment and culture we are and what we care about and what's important to us.
Thank you, Daniela. If either one of our speakers would like to answer, we have a question from Irina Ibrahim from the Embassy of Switzerland. To what extent is the male and female staff equally interested to engage in gender-related discussions? And do you think there is a need to advocate for the advantages of gender mainstreaming more among men than women, or vice versa? And if so, how do you address this challenge? Antonia, please.
Thanks. I think that's a very important question. And I think for me, it really comes from really at the beginning, how you frame the issue of gender equality. I think there is this misconception that I mentioned before, that feminism is only for women, or that gender equality only concerns women and working towards women's conditions. And there's this idea that there's a finite piece of cake, and that if you give a little more to women, then effectively it's going to take something away from men. And I think that needs to be really from the beginning of the way we frame our strategies and our mandates. It needs to be clear that gender equality is, first of all, it's something that benefits all staff, all humans. It is about, human rights, and it's about equality in terms of human rights. It's about equity as well, because sometimes we see that equality is not enough. Equity needs to be there. And I think it's important to demonstrate very concretely, and that's why I think trainings and workshops are so important, not only to bring these concepts that can be quite theoretical or complicated for colleagues to grasp sometimes around, you know, gender mainstreaming and topics like that, but also bring clearly to people the interconnection between inequality when it comes to gender with other forms of oppression to which people can relate independent of their experiences. We all have at some part of our lives either directly or indirectly seen or suffered from a form of oppression. And if we can create that link in people's mind and explain to them that it's about having a work environment that is more cohesive and where everyone is represented equally, I think you really go a long way. To be honest, at the start of my functions, it was one of the key questions I had in mind, how to make sure that I wouldn't lose men in this mandate, because they are a key part of making a success in terms of gender equality within the court. And I was really impressed by how many colleagues, male colleagues, contacted me and told me that they wanted to be allies, that they wanted to support us, that they didn't necessarily understand all of it because they hadn't lived it, but that they completely adhered to the idea that there was an issue and that it needed to be addressed, and that it was not something that would be done against them, but that would be done for the whole organization. So I think from the side of the ICC, and of course, I'm talking generally, there probably are, and there will always be people that take different approaches on this, but there's a clear understanding on this issue. That being said, I think it's also important to you know, to recognize that that we need to be sophisticated and constructive in the way that we approach these things. And I think having something like a group of male allies can be very important within you know, the workplace context, but it can also be very important to have a group where it's only female senior staff members that are engaging on this topic. And it's not because we're having a group like that we're excluding men. It's just that we're working on different parts of the workforce of the court and trying to mobilize the strengths and the uniqueness and the experiences of all these groups. So we need to also be able to you know, not perceive everything that is done as against something else. I think that is also the dangers of accepting that binary construct and that very archaic vision of how a workplace culture should work. So that's a key element for me in that sense. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Antonia. Another question, perhaps related to this in terms of how do you get everyone in and involved. If Daniela or Natalie would like to respond to what informal strategies do we employ to communicate messages related to your work in your everyday job?
I'm happy to go, but yeah, I mean, different ways, right? I mean, we've set up on our sort of internal tribunate, we call it Cosmos. There's a page there for gender focal point or gender mainstreaming, and I have my own sort of gender focal point email address so people can reach out to me. But separately, also, we've tried to sort of organize events, and I think particularly in the times of COVID, which has been slightly different, and it's been we've resorted to Zoom. But one example that I alluded to earlier is with International Women's Day and trying to get people sort of engaged and excited is, I mean, we decided to focus on, women breaking barriers in what have been traditionally male-dominated jobs. And just by sending out an email a day leading up in the week before International Women's Day, just very interesting emails about, I don't know, first trailblazers in winemaking, or the first, some of the women, just, not the usual, but just getting people thinking about it. And I found actually that I got a lot of emails back from staff members across the KC and the SPO, sharing their own experiences and their, having read, the articles that were sent around, and it creates dialogue and during International Women's Day itself, we had various different staff members across the two tribunals talk about their experiences coming up through the ranks and where they are now. And I think these are great ways of kind of fostering a very inclusive work environment, but also kind of showcasing how far we've come and allowing people to kind of feel safe, if you will, talking about these issues, and also identifying where we can improve. And I think being able to talk about these things and being able to raise these either, my door is always open virtually or otherwise. And so people are always welcome to come and talk. And if there's questions or things that they want to flag, I'm always available. And I think also just talking, you hear from people who are saying, well, we're concerned about this, or people will approach me about a section where they felt like they could perhaps use some help. And we talk about it and think about ways in which we can assist. And so I guess these are some of the more informal ways on my end that we've been kind of looking at these things.
Thank you, Daniela. Natalie, if I can ask you the following question, what would you say is a main or important challenge in working on gender mainstreaming as a gender focal point, and to also add the other side of it, what do you think is one of the most important or best practices you would recommend, whether related to this challenge or in general in the work of a gender focal point?
The main challenge that women, they have to trust themselves. Whatever the gender focal point would do, but you have women, they have to trust themselves, because you are in an international environment. And as Daniela and Antonia were saying, our colleagues, men, they were participating in all the activities that the gender focal point was organizing, and they were facilitating maybe our work, especially our colleague men in the HR. Whatever you ask them, they are here to help you. But and when you talk about the role of the gender focal point is gender equality and empowering women. If you need that, you need women who they are busy with many things. Women, especially the moms, especially the career, especially, and so themselves never comes as a priority. So they have to trust themselves. So if you want to help them, they should be aware that they need help, and you can help them, and you can empower women. That was the main challenge. Women trusting themselves, because I say about the STL in an international environment, you don't find a lot of challenges for empowering women. You see, that's it. I don't know if I answered you.
What do you think? You've definitely answered. I'm taking advantage to ask a small additional question. What would you say is one of the most important things to keep in mind as gender focal point? So a best practice that you could recommend?
Gender equality. Always keep it in mind.
Thank you, Natalie. Concise and powerful answer. We have time for some 2-3 questions before we move on to concluding remarks. And I'd like to ask, similar to the best practices, to either Antonia or Daniela, what would you advise either gender focal point in another institution or more generally individuals advocating for gender mainstreaming? If you were to give them a piece of advice, what would that be?
Oh. Yeah, that's an interesting, that's a good question. I think part of it is not to hesitate to reach out to people around you and resources. I think it's there's so many people around you, both within the organization, but also outside your organization, who stand ready to assist and who are really willing to help in any way they can. And, I think that's an incredibly powerful resource that you have. And I think, and it's one of the things, like Antonia said, the minute she was appointed, she reached out to all of us. And I think that's a fantastic network to have. And it allows you to kind of build on each other, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to think of new things or try. I mean, we've all faced this in some shape or form. And I think both within the institution and external for myself, I mean, I've had the opportunity and privilege to be invited to partake in a extensive training for gender advisors, the European Union, organized by the Volker and Bernadotte Academy. And it's a lot of what they do is also really trying to foster that network so that people can reach out and you can ask questions. And I think realizing that, you know, we all have our own responsibilities in this, each and every one of us. It's not just your task as gender focal point. You're there to facilitate and you're there to assist, but each and every one of us has a responsibility to create and to foster an inclusive work environment. And not everybody will be on board right away, or may never be, but trying to at least keep an open mind and being willing to speak and listen. And I think listening is incredibly important in this role. And I think that can go a long way.
Thank you, Daniela. Either Antonia or Natalie, we have a question about the extent to which the UN Sustainable Development Goal of gender equality factors in or inspires you to plan long-term. That question is from Marta, the Deputy Head of Human Resources at the KC, actually.
Natalie, as you wish, I'm also happy to say some words, but I don't know if you wanted to address that.
Go ahead and
all right.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. SDG 5 is critical for I think for all of us. And you know, Natalie, having been there since Beijing, this is the continuation of that work that started in that. Well, that it didn't start in Beijing, but it came together really in a way that it never had before, and it has continued to be pushed in that sense. The SDG 5 is critical for us. I'm not sure if all of us, but certainly I think we're all part of the Gender Focal Point Network of UN Women, which really brings together also gender focal points from all these international organizations, and again benefits from that lead and from that push and that sorority, I'd like to say as well. I think, you know, it's not necessarily that we're going to adhere to all the objectives of SDG 5, but it really it paves a way, and it gives us a meaning and a commitment. And I think there are quite some interesting campaigns also that are part of that we want to bring for the court. I'm thinking about the He for She campaign. I'm also thinking about the Generation Equality Forum that is being brought together by UN Women and France and Mexico, and that are also important steps in that process. So I think it's always important to have, like, you know, a global guiding star, and I think SDGs 5 is sort of like our common global guiding star in that sense. So critical indeed to have it and to follow it.
And I think that for the international tribunals, we have two SDG very important: 16, which is rule of law, and 5, women and gender equity. And because there are many components in it, you have the violence against women, you have the gender equity, you have empowering women and girls. So, and there is a lot to be done within an institution. If you talk about gender equity, for example, in every tribunal, how many judges you have, women and men? You have a target. You have to. We want to go there. How many women you have at the senior management? How many women you have in the security? How can you help women if they have violence at home? How can you help women to empower themselves, especially that are, for example, the STL is not a permanent. We are temporary organization, and then women are here to. You have to empower them. They have to build capacities to allow them to continue their career. There is a lot.
Thank you very much, Antonia and Natalie, for answering that question. We're getting close to the end of our discussion. There is definitely much more to talk about, and hopefully we'll have more opportunities to continue the conversation. I'd like to now move on to closing remarks. And before giving you the floor, I'd like to ask you to include the answer to this great question we also received from the audience. Namely, if we do this event again in 1 or 5 years, what achievements would you like to be able to report on? Antonia, would you like to start with closing remarks?
I mean, I'll be ambitious because I mean, that's how I approach this mandate, so I don't see why I should shy from it. So if we're reporting in 5 years' time, I certainly don't expect that gender parity will be fixed at the ICC, because this is something that will take quite some time in terms of reaching the levels that we hope. But I hope that we will have made some advance, that we will have specifically adopted recruitment processes that allow us to look at this in a much more robust and systematic way. I also hope that from the perspective of everything that has to do with language and recruitment processes, we will have come to an understanding and standards and practices that are much more inclusive and reflecting on gender in all that it means, you know, women, men, other groups, LGBTQI rights, something that is much more inclusive and representative of our modern communities. From the perspective of the organization itself and its commitment, I hope that we will have adopted a strategy for gender equality for the court that will look very broadly and comprehensively on all the matters that need to be looked at culture, at harassment, at gender balance, at work-life balance, at flexible working arrangements, at moving from maternity leave to having a parental leave process that is, again, reflective of our modern communities and of the way that we should embrace our workforce. Looking really at ways that are going to be giving the best to the talent that we attract at the ICC, and foster that talent and have a clear culture and clear core values that will only contribute to the performance and the productivity of the organization. So that is really my goal, to see that gender mainstreaming and gender equality becomes the new motor for the success of this court.
Thank you very much, Antonia. Natalie?
I am very ambitious, and maybe I will go beyond STL, because I started in '93 and we don't know where we will finish. But of course, for women working in a international organization, you know the challenges, you know, la compétence, you know, between the colleagues. So I would focus on life balance, because the woman, she has her career, but also she has her family, and and sometimes a lot of women, they give the priority for the family, and less for the career. And I would focus always on women empowerment, to give them chances, to give them more chances, more training, more trainings, more to empower them. As we said, can we talk about equality within the security sections? If they don't want, if they don't like it, also it's what women want, but we would like maybe to see more senior women in the international organizations.
Thank you, Natalie. You, Daniela, any concluding remarks?
Yeah, I mean, I echo what my fellow panelists, Antonia and Natalie, have said. I think having a situation, as you know, and as Antonia said, I don't think we'll as much as I hope to, and I really hope we do get there, as having, you know, gender parity across the boards in every single unit and section. You know, I'm also realistic in that respect, but I think if we can get to a point also more broadly that each and every staff member and all of us are really aware of their own a role in gender mainstreaming and their own responsibilities in this respect, and sort of demystifying what gender mainstreaming means, because I think for a lot of people, and as Antonia also touched upon earlier, a lot of people are really willing and eager, but are not entirely sure what it means or how to go about it or what kind of initiatives. And I think having a situation where that's not a question anymore, where it's clear, and it's clear that this is part of the institution's culture, which it is, but also understanding what that really means and what each and every one of us can do to contribute to that and should contribute to that. So I think that would be fantastic. And I think more broadly, if we're, at the end of the day, as international criminal tribunals, we're not unique when it comes to gender mainstreaming within all of these institutions. You face it and all these other things, but I think there is you do lead by example. And I think as an international criminal court or all these courts, we are sort of dispensing justice. We are, and I think showing and being able to lead by example and showing that, at least from our perspective, and the institution itself is doing all it can to uphold these rights, human rights, equality all over, diversity, inclusion, I think goes a long way. Also externally, in showing what we preach, what we practice, practice what we preach, essentially. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Antonia, Daniela, and Natalie, both for your time and your insight, and even more importantly, for the great work you're doing to advance gender mainstreaming in your respective courts and tribunals. We unfortunately have reached the end of our event. We hope to be able to have similar ones soon, hopefully even in person in a not too distant future. We'll be posting the recording online, and to the extent possible, we'll also revert to those who asked questions we didn't manage to answer during the event.
Many thanks, Maria, for having moderated us, and for Women in International Law and Women in International Security for bringing us together. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. And I share the thanks to the organizers and to Maria. Thank you very much. And to my fellow panelists as well. Thank you, Antonia and Natalie.
Yeah, thank you for all. It was a pleasure.